Hi, Mighty Knights. This is Mrs. Bowman, and I'm here to do a literacy lesson, and it's also an Acheti Shakoi Essential Understanding lesson. And we're going to cover, for literacy, I'm going to tell you a story and it's a story from the oral tradition of the Lakota people. And the literacy part of it is when I finish this story, you're going to retell the story in the proper sequence, which is a part of our Acadience testing. It's something we do for our fluency testing. But this story is also going to tell you how Lakota people get their Indian names. So many Lakota people, they have a Lakota name and a legal name. Just like many of you, your legal name is given to you by your parents. A Lakota name is given to you by someone who is really close to you or an elder. It is a great honor to be given a Lakota name. My legal name is Mary, which was the name of my grandma on my father's side. This was an honor as well to be named after her. My Lakota name was given to me by my mother. My Lakota name means beautiful woman who teaches the children. And the way you say that in Lakota is Wia Washtewi Wakan Iyeja Wa Ukakshpi. Yeah, my mom gave me a really long name. And it's long in the English translation, and it's also long in Lakota way. This is a picture of my mom, and she used to do work in movies, and this was taken at a documentary that she worked on. So today you're going to hear a story of how Sitting Bull received his name. Sitting Bull was a great Lakota chief from the Hunkpapa Oyate. So those are the people that live. They're part of the Lakota people, and they live in like the North Dakota, South Dakota reservation. That's actually where I'm enrolled and where my mother is from. So when he was a young boy, his name was Hunkashni or Slow. Now there's another story we have in our Knollwood Library and it is called A Boy Named Slow, which is another version of this story. He then had a wondrous thing happen to him, and he was then given the name Sitting Bull, and that was the name we all know him by today. I don't know if any of you recognize him in this picture, but he was a very famous chief. So this story starts like this. When Sitting Bull was about 6 years old, he and his family were living on the banks of the Grand River. Like all Lakota boys, he was taught to get up early and attend to the horses, to learn to ride, to shoot with the bow and arrow, to swim, to play all kinds of games, to sing and dance, and if occasion demands it, to go hunting or on the war path. So Lakota boys at an early age, they were expected to do chores, and his chore was to take care of the horses. One morning, just before daybreak, Sitting Bull, whose nickname was Hunkashni, meaning slow, he woke to go look for the horses. He did this on foot, and he had the grand opportunity to observe everything on the way: the singing of birds, the howling of coyotes, the deer watering on the river bank, and in fact everything that nature had offered. Now, Lakota people, they often looked at nature and animals and everything really closely because they learned a lot from nature. He was enjoying his morning's hike immensely and was singing and humming some new tune he had heard recently, for he was a great lover of music. So he was enjoying himself. He was just strolling around, enjoying the scenery, looking at nature, and not really paying close attention to something in front of him. Just as he reached a high hill, viewing the scenery all around him, he heard some kind of noise, and looking down, he saw a buffalo in a sitting position. So I don't know if any of you have gone to the park in the Black Hills, the game fish and parks down there, the Custer State Park, but they have a buffalo herd there. Now you're often warned not to get out of your car when you're around them, not to get close and take pictures because buffalo are very unpredictable and they can be very dangerous. A few summers back, there was a news story about how a tourist got too close and got thrown up by the buffalo, and they hooked them with their horns. So you have to be really careful around them. They're very unpredictable. Now Hunkashni, he did not have any weapons of any kind, so he became scared. He stood there scared, but still in awe as well. But the bull was looking at him in such a manner that he could not break away from it. He was just, I don't know if you've ever seen a buffalo, but they are very, there's just something about them. I'm in awe of them when I see them. They're very large, they're very majestic, and they just seem to have something very special about them. However, the bull did not show any sign of harming him. At last the bull resumed its natural position, lifted up its tail, pawed the ground, and quietly went on its way. So the bull didn't harm him. I bet he was feeling very fortunate that the bull didn't hurt him in any way. Hunkashni was glad that he was not harmed by the animal. He gave another look at it and said, Tatanka iotake unshimalayalo pilamiayalo och ila da. Sitting Bull, this is what he said in English. This is what he said. Sitting Bull, you pitied me. Thank you. I respect you. And I think I've told you guys in other lessons I've done that Lakota people believe that we are related to everything on the earth. The animals, the birds, the trees, everything in nature, that everything is related because we all came from the same place. We all came from Eon, or the rock. So therefore, we have respect for everything and we treat everything with respect. So that is what Hunkashni, or Slow, was telling the bull. Thank you for not hurting me, and I respect you, because he didn't hurt him. Finding the horses, he went home, and when he got there, he related the story about the buffalo to his father. His father called the camp crier and ordered him to proclaim to the people. So the camp crier, back at this time, they didn't have like there was no computers or anything, and this is how news was got around to the whole camp. Somebody would go and yell around the camp, and that was the camp crier, and announce what was going on or what the news of the day was. So today, the camp crier went around and announced, owing to this strange incident between the boy and the animal, that from this day hence Hunkashni shall be known as Tatranka Iotaka, or Sitting Bull. And so here's another picture of Sitting Bull. And this is a famous quote that a lot of educators use, because Sitting Bull and a lot of Lakota people, they looked at the children. The name for children in Lakota is Wankan Iyeja, which means very sacred beings. So children are looked at as something very sacred, and we have to really take care of them and nurture them because you are our future. And Sitting Bull knew this too. He was a very wise chief. And he said this quote that's often quoted by educators. Let us put our minds together and see what we can create for our children. So this is a story of how Sitting Bull received his name. It is also an example of the oral tradition of the Oceti Sakowin people. A long time ago, Lakota people, we didn't have a written language. Nothing was written down. And so all the stories and like this that we have were passed down orally at a campfire at night, or, just when they were sitting around not doing anything, they would tell stories. So this is how our stories were passed down in the oral tradition. And so this is the oral tradition version of how Sitting Bull got his name. And Plamia, for being good learners today. And that means thank you in Lakota. Now you're going to retell the story in the proper sequence. Remember, this is something you do when you do your Acadience testing, so this is good practice for you. So we are going to write out what happened and in the proper sequence of events. And I'm going to do the first part with you. So we're going to ask ourselves, what happened in the beginning? And then after that happened, that caused something else to happen. What happened next after that? And we're going to keep doing this until we get to the end of the story. And at the end of the story, something happened. After all these sequence of events, something happened. And then finally, you're going to write what happened in, what was the lesson of the story. I'm sorry, you're going to write what happened, what was the lesson of the story. Now, it might not be the same for all of you because we all have different experiences and backgrounds. So your schema might be different than classmates' schema. But what I'm asking is, what did you learn from the story? What lesson did you learn from the story? So as I said, we're going to start from the beginning of the story. What happened in the beginning? And then I'm going to do that with you. And then that was followed by a different event and so forth and so on. We're going to keep going down as to what happened. You're just going to write a few short sentences of what happened in each event, in the beginning, the middle, and the end. And then again, like I said, you're going to write what was the lesson of the story. As we write these, boys and girls, remember that we capitalize the first word of our sentences and that we put punctuation at the end of our sentences. It's always important to practice this whenever you write. So now what you're going to do is find a piece of paper at home and you're going to write what happened in the story, the events of the story, in the order that they happened. So the first one I did for you, and then you're going to do the second and third one by yourselves. So you just need a couple of sentences. So I put, Slow woke up in the early morning to check the horses. He was observing nature and singing as he walked to find the horses. So that was the thing that happened in the beginning. You're going to write what happened next, and then finally you'll write what happened in the end. After all of these events, what happened in the end. And so then after you write the sequence of events, you're going to write what lesson you learned from the story. So the lesson, and I started the first part of the sentence for you. The lesson I learned from the story is, and I put ... and then I have in parentheses, you finish the sentence. So I'm just asking what you learned from the story. The genre that this story is, it's kind of a special one by itself. It's oral history, and some of the features of that are it's a primary source, it's one person's point of view, and this is done by interview sometimes, and it's passed down for generations orally, and it's based on true accounts and events. So that's the genre of this story. So I hope you enjoyed the story about how Sitting Bull got his name, and I hope you learned a little bit about how Lakota people get their Indian names.